The crystalline towers of the Intergalactic Academy glittered against the backdrop of the massive blue giant star, Vega 7. From the observation deck of Residential Pod C-12, Benjamin Carter, Ben to his friend back on Earth, watched the streams of shuttles and transport vessels weaving intricate patterns around the massive space station. 3 months into his exchange program, and he still found the view breathtaking. Final call for Academic Seminar 9041. All third cycle students report to Lecture Hall Epsilon. The announcement echoed through the station's communication system, causing Ben to reluctantly turn away from the viewport. As the first human exchange student ever accepted to the Academy, Ben had grown accustomed to the sidelong glances, the whispered comments, and occasionally the outright dismissal. Humans were considered a developing species in the galactic community, barely a century into their interstellar exploration, while other civilizations counted their cosmic history in millennia. The Trevians, with their quad-lobe brains, could perform complex calculations faster than Earth's most advanced quantum computers. The Zealers possessed quantum logic processing that made human reasoning seem primitive by comparison. Yet here he was, having earned his place through a series of examinations and interviews that had tested the limits of his intellect. Though accepted, Ben remained aware that many viewed his presence as a political courtesy rather than a recognition of merit. Ben hurried down the translucent corridor, his footsteps barely making a sound on the self-adjusting floor. He slipped into Lecture Hall Epsilon just as Professor Zarvik was beginning the session. The tall, spindly Orvian stood at the center of the amphitheater, his silvery robes catching the light from the holographic display behind him. As you are all aware, Zarvik's voice resonated with a metallic timbre that characterized the species. The end of this academic cycle brings with it the galactic mathematical examination. A ripple of tension passed through the assembled students. Ben noticed several Trevians exchanging worried glances, their scaled skin shifting from iridescent blue to a muted gray, their species' involuntary response to stress. For those unfamiliar, Zarvik's gaze lingered on Ben. The examination has been the cornerstone of our academic tradition for 7 centuries. It is not merely a test, but a challenge that has humbled the greatest minds in our galactic community. Ben shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He'd heard whispers about this exam, but details have been scarce. Some called it the impossible test or the breaker of minds. No student has ever achieved a complete solution, Zarvik continued, his tone carrying a hint of pride. The highest recorded score was achieved by Grandmaster Ixil of the Trevian Scientific Academy, who managed to solve 78% of the examination before the allocated time expired. The professor's compound eyes scanned the room. Registration for this cycle's examination will close in 3 standard rotations. Success brings glory to your lineage and species. Failure, he paused, is the expected outcome. As the seminar concluded, students gathered in nervous clusters, discussing strategies and concerns. Ben stood alone, contemplating whether to register for an exam that apparently no one had conquered in centuries. You're not actually considering it, are you? The melodic voice behind him belonged to Vina, a Zealer whose translucent, opalescent skin seemed to pulse with her every thought. She was perhaps the closest thing Ben had to a friend at the academy. I haven't decided, Ben admitted. Vina tilted her head, her large, multifaceted eyes studying him. The examination isn't just difficult, Ben. It's designed to break students, to teach humility to the most brilliant minds in the galaxy. Then why does anyone take it? Honor, recognition. The mere attempt marks you as one of the elite. She placed a delicate 6-finger hand on his shoulder. But for a human, no offense, but your neural architecture isn't evolved enough. Ben finished, unable to keep the edge from his voice. Vina withdrew her hand. I meant no disrespect, but the exam requires computational abilities that even augmented species struggle with. Before Ben could respond, Sorik, a Trevian known for his arrogance as much as his intellect, approached them. His scaled skin rippled with patterns that conveyed amusement and disdain simultaneously. I heard humans have better pattern recognition than computational abilities, Sorek said, his voice a calculated blend of curiosity and condescension. Perhaps that's why they sent you, as an experiment to see how primitive cognition handles advanced mathematics. We manage, Ben replied evenly, though he felt heat rising to his face. Sorek made a gesture that among Trevians indicated dismissal. The examination has broken minds far superior to yours, human. Save yourself the embarrassment. As Sorek walked away, Ben felt a resolve hardening within him. He turned to the registration kiosk and placed his palm against the scanner. Benjamin Carter, Earth, registering for the Galactic mathematical examination, he said clearly. The system chimed acknowledgement, and a holographic schedule appeared before him with preparation resources and the examination date, 30 standard days away. Vena's expression conveyed concern. I hope you know what you're doing. Ben wasn't sure he did, but he knew that he wasn't just representing himself anymore. He was representing humanity. In a universe that viewed his species as intellectual infants, he would either prove them right or force them to reconsider their assumptions. I need to prepare, he said simply, downloading the available resources to his personal device. That night, as Ben reviewed the historical records of previous examinations, he felt the weight of what he'd committed to. The preparation materials included testimonials from past candidates, brilliant minds who described their experience as shattering and transformative despite failure. There were references to logic puzzles that defy conventional solution paths and symbolic transformations that reconfigure with each attempt to solve them. Yet for all the discussion of the examination, there were no concrete examples of its content, as if the very nature of the problems was shrouded in academically sanctioned secrecy. Ben leaned back in his chair, staring at the faint reflection of Earth in his viewport. So much of human achievement had come not from raw computational power, but from approaching problems from unexpected angles. If he couldn't outcompute the other species, perhaps he could outthink them. With that thought, he set to work. The next weeks passed in a blur of study and preparation. Ben divided his time between the Academy's vast library and the computational practice labs, where students could use advanced simulation technology to enhance their mathematical intuition. In the library, Ben discovered something curious. While current records of the examination were sealed, there were archived descriptions dating back several centuries. He found references to matrix configurations and logical isolation cells that seemed to follow specific patterns. The more he read, the more he felt a strange sense of familiarity with the descriptions, though he couldn't place why. Meanwhile, in the practice labs, he observed other students using neural enhancement technology to train their minds for the computational demands of the examination. Trevians connected directly to quantum processors, their scaled skin flickering with calculations too rapid for human eyes to follow. Zealers entered trance-like states where they claimed to perceive mathematics as landscape. Ben tried these technologies but found them disorienting. His human brain didn't interface seamlessly with alien tech designed for different neural architectures. Instead, he found himself returning to fundamental principles, working through complex problems methodically rather than through raw computational power. As the examination day drew closer, Ben noticed a change in how others regarded him. The initial dismissal had transformed into something between pity and morbid curiosity, as if they were watching a doomed creature walking willingly toward its demise. Professor Zarvik summoned Ben to his office one evening, a week before the examination. The professor's chamber was austere, with only holographic models of complex mathematical structures decorating the otherwise empty space. Mr. Carter, Zarvik began, his compound eyes unreadable. I have reviewed your preparation logs. You have spent significantly less time with the neural enhancers than any other candidate. They don't work well with human neurology, Ben explained. Precisely my point. Zarvik's fingers tapped a rhythm on his desk. The examination was designed for minds capable of advanced computational processing. Your species has not yet evolved the necessary neural architecture. Ben kept his expression neutral. With respect, Professor, different approaches can sometimes yield equivalent results. Not in this case. Zarvik's tone was final. I am offering you the opportunity to withdraw your registration without penalty. Your withdrawal would be recorded as a medical exemption, preserving your dignity and that of your species. The implication was clear. Zarvik believed Ben's failure would embarrass humanity. I appreciate your concern, Ben said carefully, but I'll continue with my registration. Zarvik's posture stiffened. Very well, but understand this. The examination is not merely difficult, Mr. Carter. It is designed to illuminate the boundaries of cognitive capacity. For 7 centuries, it has demonstrated the limitations of even the most advanced minds. Your attempt may prove instructive for future human applicants. As Ben left the professor's office, he couldn't shake the feeling that Zarvik's warning contained something beyond mere condescension, something almost like fear. The morning of the examination dawned with an air of ceremony. The Grand Hall, normally reserved for diplomatic functions and major presentations, had been configured for the event. 322 candidates from across the galaxy made their way to assigned stations. Floating platforms equipped with holographic interfaces and sensory isolation fields to prevent any form of assistance or collaboration. Ben took his place, acutely aware of being the only human in the vast chamber. The curved ceiling of crystal displayed the blue giant star around which the Academy orbited, bathing everything in ethereal azure light. At precisely the designated time, Professor Zarvik rose from his position at the head of the examination committee. For 7 centuries, the Galactic mathematical examination has tested the limits of intellectual achievement, he intoned. Today, you join the ranks of those who have faced this challenge. Remember that the journey is as significant as the destination. You have 8 standard hours. Begin. The air in front of each candidate shimmered as the examination materialized. Ben felt his heart rate increase as the problem set appeared before him. A complex, shifting matrix of symbols and connecting lines that seemed to reconfigure itself as he tried to focus on any single element. Around him, he could hear subtle sounds of concentration, the clicking mandibles of Arthean students, the harmonic hums from Zealer throats as they entered their calculation trances, the soft hiss of Trevian cooling systems preventing their brains from overheating during intense computation. Ben stared at the problem, fighting a momentary wave of panic. The symbols swirled and shifted, creating what looked like an intentional perceptual illusion. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and then looked again, trying to see beyond the deliberate complexity. There was something oddly familiar about the structure. The way the symbols were arranged in what appeared to be randomness, but with hidden constraints. The shifting wasn't completely chaotic. It followed rules, patterns that became apparent if you looked at the whole rather than focusing on individual elements. And then, like a distant memory surfacing, Ben remembered his grandmother teaching him Sudoku puzzles on lazy Sunday afternoons back on Earth. How she'd explained that the apparent complexity was governed by simple rules. Each row, column, and box needed to contain all the required elements without repetition. Could it be that simple? That fundamentally human? Ben leaned forward, focusing not on the alien symbols, but on their relationships. He began mentally translating the shifting matrix into something more familiar. A grid with cells that needed to be filled according to logical constraints. The more he looked, the more certain he became. The Galactic mathematical examination, the legendary test that had broken the most brilliant minds in the galaxy for centuries, was essentially an incredibly complex version of Sudoku, disguised by alien symbolism, perceptual illusions, and dimensional shifting that made it appear to be something far more esoteric. Ben felt a smile tugging at his lips. He began working methodically, identifying the constraints, establishing the relationships between symbols, and working through the puzzle cell by cell, grid by grid. The illusions and shifts became irrelevant once he understood the underlying structure. Hours passed. Around him, frustration mounted. He heard a Trevian muttering about recursive logic traps and saw a Zealer slumped in defeat, their skin dulled to a lifeless gray. Yet Ben continued. His human brain evolved to find patterns in chaos, to see shapes in clouds and faces in random arrangements, working through the puzzle with growing confidence. 7 hours into the examination, Ben reviewed his solution one final time. Everything aligned. Every constraint was satisfied. The puzzle, stripped of its intimidating appearance, was solved. He pressed his palm to the submission panel. "Complete," he said quietly. For a moment, nothing happened. Then his interface glowed with confirmation, and a message appeared. Solution verified. Examination complete. Score 100%. The chamber fell silent. Ben looked up to find every eye, compound and otherwise, fixed on him. Professor Zarvik stood frozen, his silver robes catching the blue light like a statue cast in metal. No one had ever completed the examination. No one had ever scored 100%. And certainly, no human should have been capable of it. The verification process was immediate and thorough. Ben was escorted to a smaller chamber where a panel of 7 professors, including Zarvik, awaited him. The tension in the room was palpable. Mr. Carter, began an elderly Arthian professor whose name Ben didn't know. In 7 centuries, no candidate has achieved a complete solution to the examination. You understand why we must verify your methodology. Ben nodded. Of course. Please explain how you approach the problem, Zarvik said, his voice carefully controlled. Ben took a deep breath. The examination appears complex because of the perceptual illusions and symbolic transformations designed to obscure its true nature. But at its core, it's a logic puzzle that humans call Sudoku. Sudoku, the Arthian professor pronounced the word carefully. It's an ancient Earth game, Ben explained. A puzzle where numbers, or in this case, symbols, must be arranged so that each row, column, and defined subsection contains each symbol exactly once. The solution requires no advanced computation, just logical deduction and pattern recognition. Zarvik's compound eyes narrowed. Impossible. The examination incorporates quantum uncertainty principles and nonlinear logical progressions. With respect, Professor, those elements are part of the disguise, not the underlying structure. They create the illusion of insurmountable complexity. Demonstrate, demanded another professor, a Trevian whose scales had turned a skeptical shade of copper. The examination was projected into the center of the room. Ben walked through his solution step by step, showing how he had identified the true nature of the puzzle beneath its obfuscating elements. As he progressed, he could see the dawning realization, and in some cases, disbelief, on the faces of the panel. This is unprecedented, the Arthian professor murmured when Ben had finished. Zarvik remained silent, his posture rigid. Finally, he spoke. The verification confirms Mr. Carter's solution is correct. However, this raises questions about the examination itself. Perhaps it has become outdated, or perhaps, Ben suggested carefully, it demonstrates that different cognitive approaches can solve the same problem. Computational power isn't always the answer. Sometimes, you need to see the pattern behind the complexity. The panel deliberated in private for nearly an hour before calling Ben back. The Arthian professor addressed him formally. Benjamin Carter of Earth, your solution has been verified and accepted. You are the first candidate in the history of the Intergalactic Academy to achieve a perfect score on the Galactic Mathematical Examination. This achievement will be recorded in the academic archives and recognized at tomorrow's assembly. Ben nodded, overwhelmed by the implications. He had come to the Academy to represent humanity, to prove that his species deserved consideration in the galactic community of minds. He hadn't expected to make history. As he left the verification chamber, he found Vina waiting for him, her skin pulsing with excited colors. Is it true? She asked. You solved it completely? Ben nodded, still processing the reality himself. Wow. Her multifaceted eyes studied him with new interest. I saw the pattern beneath the complexity, he said simply. Sometimes the most intimidating problems have surprisingly elegant solutions. Word spread through the academy like wildfire. By evening, the once anonymous human exchange student had become the subject of intense curiosity and debate. Some students sought him out, asking questions or offering congratulations. Others, like Sorik, kept their distance, their pride wounded by the unexpected turn of events. That night, as Ben looked out at the blue giant star from his viewport, he reflected on how quickly perceptions could change. He had arrived at the academy as a curiosity, a representative of a developing species, included more for political than academic reasons. Now, he had challenged centuries of assumptions about cognitive capabilities and problem-solving approaches. Tomorrow would bring formal recognition, questions, perhaps even resentment from those who had invested years in preparation for an examination they had failed while he had succeeded. But for tonight, Ben allowed himself to simply appreciate the view. The swirling gases of the blue giant, the distant pinpricks of stars, and the knowledge that he had earned his place among them. The central forum of the Intergalactic Academy was filled to capacity the following day. Students, faculty, and even representatives from various galactic governments had assembled for what had become an unexpectedly significant event. The massive chamber, with its soaring arches and transparent ceiling revealing the stars beyond, hummed with anticipation and speculation. Ben stood backstage, dressed in formal academy attire that had been hastily tailored for him. He felt the weight of history and expectation pressing down on him, and fought to maintain his composure. Nervous, Vina had appeared beside him, her skin glowing with supportive hues. "A bit, Ben," admitted. "I didn't expect all of this." "You've changed things," she said simply. "For better or worse. The Academy will never be the same after today." Before Ben could respond, the ceremony began. The Academic Council, 12 distinguished scholars representing the major intellectual traditions of the galaxy, processed into the forum. Professor Zarvik among them, his silver robes now augmented with the gold trim of formal occasions. The head of council, an ancient Timeran whose species was known for their perfect memory and thousand-year lifespans, addressed the assembly. For 7 centuries, the Galactic Mathematical Examination has stood as the pinnacle of academic challenge within our institution. It has humbled the greatest minds, teaching generations of scholars the value of recognizing the boundaries of knowledge. The Timuran's voice resonated through the chamber without technological assistance. Yesterday, those boundaries were redrawn. A murmur passed through the crowd. Benjamin Carter of Earth, the head of council continued, stepped forward to be recognized. Ben walked onto the central platform, acutely aware of thousands of eyes, of various evolutionary designs, fixed upon him. Through an approach unanticipated by the examination's designers, you have achieved what no student has in 7 centuries. The Academic Council hereby confers upon you the title of Scholar Emeritus, with all the privileges and responsibilities therein. A dais rose from the floor, bearing a medallion of crystalline material that seemed to capture and amplify the blue light from the giant star overhead. This honor, the head of council explained, has previously been reserved for those who have contributed decades of research to their fields. You are the youngest recipient and the first to earn it through examination rather than lifetime achievement. As the medallion was placed around Ben's neck, he felt its surprising weight, both physical and symbolic. He was no longer just a student or even just a representative of humanity. He had become a symbol himself of unexpected solutions, of different approaches to seemingly impossible problems. The head of council gestured for Ben to address the assembly. He hadn't prepared remarks, hadn't expected to speak, but as he looked out at the diverse gathering of species and minds, words came to him. "Thank you for this honor," he began, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "Yesterday, I didn't approach the examination trying to make history. I simply saw a familiar pattern beneath unfamiliar complexity." He paused, gathering his thoughts. Throughout human history, our greatest advances often came not from raw computational power, but from seeing connections others missed, from recognizing patterns in chaos, from approaching problems from unexpected angles. He touched the medallion at his chest. The lesson I take from this experience isn't that one approach is superior to another, but that diversity of thought, across species, across cognitive architectures, offers us more paths to understanding. As he concluded his remarks, the forum erupted in applause, though Ben noticed not everyone participated. Professor Zarvik remained stoic, his compound eyes unreadable. Sorik and a group of Trevian students stood with deliberate stillness, their scaled skin displaying patterns of disapproval. Yet others, including many younger students from species considered less mathematically inclined, displayed unmistakable signs of inspiration and hope. Among them, Ben spotted a small group of recent arrivals from developing worlds, species that, like humans, were relatively new to the galactic community. The formal ceremony concluded, but its effects reverberated throughout the academy and beyond. In the days that followed, Ben found himself the subject of academic interviews, requests for tutoring, and even diplomatic overtures from representatives seeking to understand how human cognition might complement their own species' approaches to persistent problems. Professor Zarvik requested a private meeting 1 week after the ceremony. His office remained austere, but Ben noticed the addition of a holographic representation of the examination solution pattern. Scholar Emeritus Carter, Zarvik began formally, acknowledging Ben's new title. I have been studying your solution methodology extensively. And Ben prompted when the professor fell silent. And I find myself reconsidering certain assumptions. Zarvik's admission seemed difficult for him. For centuries, we have equated advanced cognition with computational capacity. Your approach suggests alternative paths to insight. Different, not lesser, Ben suggested. Perhaps. Zarvik's compound eyes fixed on Ben. The Academic Council is debating changes to the examination. Some argue it should be redesigned to prevent solution through pattern recognition alone. Others suggest it should remain as a testament to the importance of diverse problem-solving approaches. In your position, Professor? Zarvik was silent for a long moment. I have spent my career believing in the superiority of certain cognitive architectures. It is challenging to reconsider such foundational beliefs. Growth often is, Ben said quietly. Indeed, Zarvik gestured to a notification hovering above his desk. I should inform you that applications from Earth and other developing worlds have increased 300% since your achievement. The next academic cycle will see unprecedented diversity in our student population. Ben couldn't help but smile. That sounds like progress to me. Progress, Zarvik repeated, testing the word. Or merely change. Time will determine which. As the academic cycle drew to a close, Ben faced a decision. Return to Earth as scheduled or accept the Academy's offer to remain as both student and lecturer, helping to bridge the gap between human problem-solving approaches and those of other species. Vina found him in the observation deck, watching shuttles arrive with the next cycle students. Among them, more humans than had ever studied at the Academy before. Have you decided? She asked, settling beside him. I think I have, Ben replied. There's still so much I can learn here, and, apparently, some things I might be able to teach as well. Vina's skin rippled with approval. The Academy needs perspectives like yours, especially now, with so many new species joining our community. It won't be easy, Ben acknowledged. Change never is. There will be resistance, skepticism. Of course. Vina's tone was matter of fact. But that's how progress happens. One solution, one insight, one connection at a time. As they watched, a shuttle docked, and a group of new students emerged. Humans, yes, but also representatives from 3 other developing worlds that had previously sent only observers to the Academy, never full students. Ben touched the Scholar Emeritus medallion that he still wore, feeling its weight and what it represented. Not just personal achievement, but the opening of doors, the challenging of assumptions, the recognition that brilliance came in many forms across the vast diversity of galactic life. Sometimes, the most profound truths were hidden in plain sight, disguised as complexity when their essence was elegant simplicity. Like a Sudoku puzzle masquerading as the most challenging test in the galaxy, Solutions often came not from confronting problems as presented, but from seeing them as they truly were. And sometimes that required a perspective no one had thought to consider before. The blue giant star cast its light through the crystal viewport, illuminating the new arrivals as they took their first steps into the Intergalactic Academy. No longer just spectators in the grand conversation of galactic intellect, but full participants, bringing their unique approaches to the challenges that awaited them all. Ben smiled. The journey was just beginning.